That was The Crowded Cell by my guest PJ Harvey. I feel like we should also talk a little bit about you making music for the Virtues. So I know, because I interviewed Shane Meadows about this, about the Virtues, that he had the idea, he knew what he was going to do, and he was thinking about music. And obviously Shane is known for great soundtracks, and he's also known for working with certain people. But he thought, they were just going, it would be great, someone like, Polly Harvey would be really brilliant. And then you got in touch with him you heard him over the airwaves somewhere, and you got in touch with him and said you would like to work with him.
That was extraordinary, actually. I think I'd written him a letter, a handwritten letter, and sent him a CD of some soundtrack work that I'd done, and just said, just a fan letter really, saying, and if there's ever an opportunity to work with you, that would be great. And it landed on his desk about the same day that he had the thought of, I wonder if Polly Harvey would be interested. So, so that's how that happened. But I love how things like that come together. I mean, going back to when I first saw Seamus's exhibition, I knew nothing about him. And I just felt that a connection had to be made, in the same way that I've written to Shane. I forget how I tracked you down, but I did. And I just...
Did you write your letter?
No, I got a phone call from...
my management office,
in Dublin.
I think.
And they ran through.
Yeah. And then we just met for a coffee somewhere when I was on a tour.
You were playing in Shepherd's Bush. It was you and John and Woman Walked By. Is it that album?
Oh, Woman and Man Walked By.
That's when I first
exactly.
saw you live.
Yeah.
Then we met.
Yeah. So I often I operate on those feelings. Because it's not that often that I feel really connected to another artist's work, and if I do, I want to reach out and meet them.
Yeah. And you've recorded a version of Red Right Hand for Peaky Blinders, because I know you worked on the Peaky Blinders 2, I think, soundtrack.
Series 2.
Yeah.
Series 2, I composed the music along with Flood. We worked together on it, and during that time we did a version of Red Right Hand, like every composer does that works on the series. And I think at the time it was used in a scene, but it was never released. And so now I think they're compiling all of the Peaky Blinders soundtracks to release, and they've chosen to release my Red Right Hand as the first single.
Oh, so it's not an orphan one anymore?
Not an orphan anymore, no.
I worry about your orphan tracks.
Don't worry, they're going to find their place. They're light, yeah.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Take a little walk to the edge of time.
You're listening to Sound and Vision on Six Music with me, Miranda Sawyer, and my guests PJ Harvey and Seamus Murphy. You've talked a little bit about working with Shane. When you work with people, you make that connection. You've worked with, for instance, Ian Rickson a lot, and he is a director, and he directed Jerusalem, which I know that you were thinking about a little bit when you did Let England Shake, and then you worked with him on various stage shows.
Yes.
How is that for you? I mean, as compared with working on a film, or as compared with working with Shane Meadows, or in your normal environment?
I love working in theatre. I thrive on it. I think I've always been drawn to the stage, even when I was a little girl. Something about the stage and performance that I thrive on. And so I like working as a composer near the stage, and it's a joy for me to be involved in it, but not actually having to be the one on the stage too. And I've built up a very good working relationship with Ian Rickson.
The most recent one was All About Eve, right?
Most recent one, All About Eve, with Eva Van Hove, and that was great. Actually, I got to write a song for Gillian Anderson to sing and a song for Lily James to sing in their roles, which worked really well. I was very pleased with that soundtrack too. I love soundtrack work. Would love to do it more. I've always had such a huge love of film and filmmakers, and most of the music that I listen to are soundtrack compositions now. That's what I fall in love with. And I think that's where some of the most exciting music is happening at the moment.
Which ones would they be?
Mica Levi, Under the Skin, pretty much anything that she does.
Yeah,
Jackie, her score to Jackie was incredible. Jonny Greenwood's work, amazing. Colin Stetson did soundtrack to the TV series The First with Sean Penn. that blew my mind. I can never say her name. Hilda Guðnadóttir, who did Chernobyl, another incredible musician. David Holmes. I could go on and on, but yeah.
This is your new bag, partly your new bag.
It's what excites me the most. I thought Tom York's soundtrack for Suspiria was some of the best work he's ever done. It was amazing, and I can see how it's moved him into a different area now as a musician, and I think that's what it does for me, actually. It frees you in some ways. If you've been a songwriter all your life, to have then moved into the world where you're just soundtracking the action to something else, it's a very freeing experience, and I think moves you into experimentation, which helps your work grow hugely.
It is interesting, isn't it? That slight anonymity that's needed a little bit. You know, once you've established yourself as an artist, which you have, so everyone knows that you are PJ Harvey when you're performing, and then to have that slightly taken away when you were making the film, as you mentioned, but also when you're making a soundtrack, it's a freeing thing.
It is a freeing thing, and you're just there to serve the work and to serve the director. You know, and you've got to try and make their vision happen for them, and I love that. I love that, trying to interpret what it is that can really support this film or this theatre play or what the director is going for.
So would you like to pick a track that we could play on here, on the show? Is a particular one
from one of my favourite
from one of your
soundtracks?
favourites?
Or I would say you can choose anything you like from the soundtrack to Jackie, because it's one of my favourite soundtracks ever.
And that's Mica Levi, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm Miranda Sawyer on Six Music, here with my guests PJ Harvey and Seamus Murphy, talking about their new film, A Dog Called Money, that comes to cinemas and on Mubi from 8th of November. So if you were thinking about this process, which is a long process, you know, we can witness it as in the film. So we've got an hour and a half of a lovely film to absorb. Which bits stand out for you? Because it's quite often not necessarily things that you see in a film, it's something that's in your head. You first, Polly.
Well, one of my favourite pieces of Seamus's filming actually is he does a long moving shot of me just walking through the streets of Afghanistan on our way to something. And to begin with, he's shooting from behind me, so you're not actually sure if it's me or not, and I have a veil and you can't really see. I really like that shot. It goes on for a couple of minutes. It reminds me so much of how I felt at that moment. And although, you know, wearing a veil as a woman there, it was very interesting to me because I hadn't really done that before. I mean, a little bit in Kosovo I'd had to, but in Afghanistan all the time, and how it almost feels a little bit like a mask, and in doing so frees you, really, because nobody could see me, or I was just looking out from a very small sort of area of my face, and it freed me to be utterly in the moment. And I remember like that shot of me walking through the streets, everything, I'd never seen this before. I mean, great chasms in the road that hadn't ever been repaired, and people with nothing sitting in the dirt, and traffic seeming to go everywhere, and freezing cold mud and rocks, and also wealth of life and people selling things, and it was like an assault on my senses of something I'd never experienced before, and all through looking out under this veil. Anyway, that shot means a lot to me because I just remember it so well, that extraordinary feeling of newness. I've never been here before. And also, it took away everything I'd formed of myself to date as a person, if that makes sense, because I was in a situation I'd never been in, and completely covered. You know, there was nothing about me that was PJ Harvey at all. I was just a woman's pair of eyes. And a lot of the time I was mistaken for an Afghan, like other Afghan women would talk to me because all they could see was my eyes, and I have got quite dark eyes. And it's just this sense of utterly being in a place and nothing else but the moment you're in. I don't know if I explained that very well, but that's why that shot in particular means quite a lot to me.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because invisibility is a superpower, and it's not one that's granted to you very often, because people know who you are. So to be able to be invisible in a completely new environment, it is like you're a ninja, isn't it? Moving through. What about you, Seamus?
I loved the bit with the children in that little village of Stalif. You know, there's a village maybe 60 kilometres north of Kabul that we went to. I'd been there a few times before. It's a beautiful village. It's like something in Tuscany. And we saw these kids shouting to the birds, and they were gathering things. We weren't sure what they were doing. And
it was just in ruins, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was just rubble,
it had been
walls of
American
the old,
airstrikes on the Taliban. The Taliban had taken over that whole area. So they beckoned us to their home, do you remember? And we sat around, and it was Polly's notebook. She says, you know, they're looking at us, we're looking at them. We didn't quite know what was going on. What it was that little village is famous for its crafts, and they were going to try and sell us some little crafts. But it was such a soft sell. We didn't know what was going on. They were pouring us tea.
It became a poem called The Guest Room,
That's
didn't
right.
it? Because as a guest in someone's house, they will protect you with their lives, won't they? I mean,
once
it's
you're over
one
the
of
threshold,
their
that's it.
customs, one of their rules.
Yeah. They'll feed you.
So we were in their house as their guest, under their protection.
So I loved that. The other thing I loved was Somerset House, because, you know, I introduced Polly to certain places that I knew, but she introduced me to that world, which was the recording. And I mean, it's an extraordinary kind of instance of recording. But that was 5 weeks that I'll never forget, you know, in that space with these musicians creating incredible music and ideas. And it came from this wellspring of these travels.
I know what I wanted to ask you. What was that incredible instrument that you had that looked a bit like a guitar, but it had a funny man sticking out the end?
It's a hurdy-gurdy.
And you were...
It's a hurdy-gurdy.
That is a hurdy-gurdy, a genuine hurdy-gurdy.
It's a genuine hurdy-gurdy.
And you were cranking it round.
Yeah.
And saying, "Oh, it makes a lovely noise." Polly, Harvey, Seamus Murphy, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,